Kael Tarris was only 17 when he filmed the last known footage of his missing sister, an eerie clip that not only exposed a neighbor's dark secret, but also revealed something far more terrifying watching from the woods. Ashburn Ridge was the kind of place people forgot about. Nestled between thick woods and quiet back roads, it was a town where life moved slowly, where neighbors waved from porches and Sunday potlucks were the most exciting events of the month. The Tarris family, Elira, Joran, and their 2 children, Kael and Niva, lived in a modest 2-story home on the edge of Oakwood Lane. Their lives were predictable in the best way. Elira ran the town's only bakery, famous for her cinnamon rolls, and Joran worked from home editing wedding videos and commercials for local businesses. Kael, 16, spent his time filming skateboard tricks and uploading them to his small YouTube channel. Niva, 10, had an obsession with insects and often wandered the fields collecting beetles and caterpillars in little glass jars. Everything changed the day a man named Merrik Dane moved into the Claymore house. The Claymore house had been empty for years. Once a grand home, it had decayed into a crumbling relic. The roof sagged, paint peeled from the walls, and ivy had nearly swallowed the front porch. Most people in Ashburn Ridge assumed it would be torn down. So when a sleek, black pickup truck pulled into the driveway one rainy afternoon, it drew attention. Merrik didn't wave to the neighbors or introduce himself. He wore a dark coat with the collar pulled up and gloves even in warm weather. He moved in quietly, like a shadow, unloading boxes at odd hours, always looking over his shoulder. The townspeople whispered, but curiosity died quickly in Ashburn Ridge. People went back to their routines. Kael was the first to notice something strange. It started when he was filming one of his drone videos in the woods behind their street. His drone, buzzing above the treetops, caught a brief view of Merrik's backyard. Nothing seemed unusual until he noticed movement by the garage. Curious, he rewound the footage and zoomed in. That's when he saw it. Merrik was dragging something large, wrapped in a thick gray tarp. The shape was bulky and stiff, almost human in size. Merrik struggled to pull it into the yard before digging a shallow hole and covering it with dirt. Kael showed the video to his father, who dismissed it at first, assuming it was trash or construction materials. But the way Merrik looked around before digging, it didn't feel right. Joran enhanced the video, adjusting brightness and contrast. The shape under the tarp looked disturbingly like a body. Elira was shaken, but remained calm. She persuaded Joran to report the footage anonymously to the police. Officers arrived a day later, questioned Merrik, and then inspected the backyard. The ground was soft, recently disturbed, but nothing illegal was found. The officers left after an hour. Merrik stood on his porch the entire time, silent, staring across the street at the Tarris house. Joran didn't like the look in his eyes. Something about the man's expression felt hollow, unreadable. That night, the Tarris family sat in their living room, the tension thick. Niva asked who the man was, and Elira quickly changed the subject. Despite the police finding nothing, Joran couldn't shake the unease. He ordered a set of small security cameras and began placing them discreetly around their property. One camera was hidden inside a bird feeder that faced the Claymore house. Another was placed in the hollow of an old tree near the woods. He didn't know what he expected to see, but something inside him said this wasn't over. And he was right. Because that night, when Kael reviewed the drone footage again, he noticed something he hadn't before. Just at the edge of the frame, barely visible between the trees, was another figure. Still, watching. Not Merrik. Not anyone they recognized. That's when the fear truly began. Joran couldn't sleep. The image from the drone footage haunted him. Not just Merrik dragging a heavy tarp across the yard, but the vague figure in the background, partially hidden among the trees. He had paused the footage frame by frame, hoping it was a trick of the light or an odd shadow, but it wasn't. There was something there. a person, or at least something shaped like one, watching from the woods. The figure's outline was just clear enough to show long arms and an unnaturally still posture. It hadn't moved during the entire clip. The next morning, Joran reviewed all the video from the bird feeder camera. The camera was angled toward Merrik's backyard and updated every few seconds with a still image. For days, nothing had changed, just Merrik's overgrown lawn, a few birds, and trees swaying gently in the background. But on the 5th day after installation, the images caught something strange. Merrik was outside again after midnight digging. This time, instead of burying something, he was unearthing. He pulled the tarp from the dirt, unfolded it, and carefully unwrapped it. Whatever was inside was never fully visible, but Joran noticed Merrik handling it with both caution and familiarity. It wasn't trash. It wasn't junk. It was something important to him. Then came the part that truly disturbed him. In the next few images, there was movement in the background, the same area where the figure had stood before. It was there again, closer this time, still motionless but clearer. The skin looked pale, almost glowing under the camera's night vision. And though the image resolution wasn't sharp, Joran could swear it had eyes that reflected the camera light like an animal's. He showed Alira the footage. She watched it without saying a word. Her hands trembled slightly as she sipped her tea, her face unreadable. They both knew they couldn't go to the police again. They had already been dismissed once, and with nothing concrete in their hands, they'd be ignored again. Instead, Joran started backing up every file, organizing clips by date, keeping notes on Merrik's patterns. They discovered that he only came out at night, and only on cloudy or foggy evenings. He never brought groceries or trash outside, never mowed the lawn, and had no visitors. Then Kael added a new piece to the puzzle. He had been reviewing a time-lapse video from the tree trunk camera, which captured motion-activated clips during the night. One night, shortly before the digging incident, Merrik had walked out of his back door at exactly 2:03 a.m. He walked toward the woods, but stopped halfway. In that clip, he stood completely still for almost 10 minutes, just staring at the trees. Then slowly, he raised one hand in what looked like a wave. The camera caught no response. He turned back and went inside. It was a bizarre act. No digging. No strange objects, just a silent moment in the dark. 3 days later, the camera in the bird feeder caught something new. Merrik had set up an object in his backyard. At first, it looked like a chair, but upon zooming in, they realized it was more like a wooden frame with ropes dangling from it. The kind used for tying things down. It faced the woods, not the house. Why would anyone build something like that in their yard, pointing into the forest? That same night, Joran heard tapping. Soft, deliberate taps on the window facing Merrik's home. He checked, but saw nothing. The next morning, Kael found a small charm hanging on their mailbox, a crudely carved piece of wood shaped like an eye. None of them had ever seen it before. Alira took it inside and locked all the doors. From that day on, the air around the Claymore house felt heavier, like something unseen was pressing down on the entire neighborhood. The birds stopped chirping. Near Merrik's yard, the breeze never seemed to blow there, and every time they reviewed the footage, that pale figure seemed just a little bit closer. It happened on a Tuesday. The sky was overcast, the wind sharp, and the air carried the heavy stillness that always seemed to linger around the Claymore house. Niva had begged to go to the park after lunch. It was just down the street, a short bike ride away. She'd gone there countless times alone. Alira hesitated, but after checking her watch and seeing that it was still early, she finally agreed. Niva promised to be back before sunset. She never came back. When Alira realized Niva had missed dinner, a creeping panic began to stir in her chest. She called her name through the house, checked the backyard, and texted Kael, who had been editing in his room all afternoon. He hadn't seen her either. By the time Joran got home from a hardware store run, the fear had fully settled in. They called Niva's friends. No one had heard from her. 30 minutes later, they were driving through town, retracing her usual bike path, calling her name out the car windows. They found her bike abandoned by the swing set. No scuff marks, no sign of struggle, just lying there as if she'd simply stepped away and never returned. The police arrived swiftly. The entire community joined the search. Flashlights scanned the woods. Dogs were brought in. Drones flew overhead. Elira and Joran gave the police all the surveillance footage they had. But the only recent clips showed birds, squirrels, wind. In the trees, nothing more. Except for one thing. At exactly 2:43 a.m., the night before Niva vanished, the bird feeder camera captured Merrik leaving his house, carrying what looked like a bundle. It was too dark to make out the shape, but it appeared to be cradled in his arms, like a child. He didn't head into his yard this time. He turned and walked toward the forest trail that wound deep behind both their properties. The clip lasted only 40 seconds. In the final frame, something appeared behind him, just for a moment. That figure again. Thin, pale, unmoving, and now close enough that Joran could make out its proportions. Its arms were longer than they should be, its head slightly too large, and its eyes, pitch black, round, and gleaming. The footage left the investigators disturbed, but not convinced. They still treated the case like a potential runaway, citing a lack of evidence linking Merrik directly to Niva's disappearance. They questioned him briefly, but he denied everything. No search warrant was issued, no arrest. The town of Ashburn Ridge changed overnight. Parents clung to their children, streets emptied by sundown, and everyone avoided the Claymore house. But Elira refused to sit idle. She spent every night scrubbing through hours of footage, hoping to find something, anything, that might lead to Niva. On the fourth night after the disappearance, she found it. The motion camera from the woods had caught a brief, shaky clip at 3:11 a.m. It showed Merrik standing at the edge of the trees, arms outstretched. He was holding nothing this time, just standing there with a strange expression on his face. Peaceful, almost reverent. Then, from the right side of the frame, a second figure emerged. It was hunched, gliding silently through the leaves. Elira. Paused the video and zoomed in. The figure's face was obscured, but a hand reached out and touched Merrik's shoulder. A long, bony hand with fingers like twigs. Merrik didn't flinch. Instead, he turned toward it and nodded. And just behind the tree line, in a flash so fast it was almost missed, another small figure moved past the camera. It was wearing Niva's yellow raincoat. From that moment on, Elira knew her daughter hadn't run away. She hadn't been kidnapped in the traditional sense. Something else had taken her. Something old. Something hiding in the woods, using Merrik as its guide. And they were still out there. Kael couldn't sleep. The days since Niva's disappearance had passed in a blur of search parties, unanswered questions, and late-night surveillance sessions. But what haunted him most was the feeling of helplessness. The knowledge that something was happening right under their noses and no one was doing anything about it. The police had long stopped calling. Neighbors avoided the Tarris family, as if fearing that whatever had taken Niva might reach for them next. Kael had started having dreams. In them, Niva stood in the woods, her back turned, surrounded by tall trees that seemed to bend toward her. Sometimes she would slowly turn around, her face unreadable, her eyes black and endless. He would wake up gasping for air, covered in sweat. On the 7th night after she vanished, he made a decision. He took his camera, flashlight, and a pocket knife and slipped out the back door without telling his parents. He walked silently past their yard, across the street, and through the side path that led to the Claymore property. Every instinct told him to turn back, but he pushed forward. The backyard was quiet. Too quiet. Even the wind refused to stir. The wooden frame Merrik had built was still there, standing like a forgotten altar pointed toward the woods. Kael circled around the house, camera in hand, and found the shed door slightly ajar. He hesitated, then pushed it open. Inside, the smell hit him first, musty and earthy, like damp stone and rotting wood. The shed was empty except for gardening tools and a stack of plastic bins. But behind them, hidden beneath an old tarp, Kael found something else. A hatch in the floor, made of rusted metal and held closed by a simple latch. His hands shook as he lifted it. Below was a narrow staircase leading into darkness. He turned on his flashlight and camera, then descended slowly, the air growing colder with each step. The walls were lined with dirt and concrete. The silence, so complete it rang in his ears. At the bottom, he found a small underground room. It looked like a bunker. Against one wall was a long wooden table covered in old videotapes, all labeled with dates. Some were decades old. Scattered among them were Polaroids, grainy, yellowing photos of children. Some smiling, some crying, some sleeping. Every photo had a name written on the back. Kael's heart pounded as he scanned them. None looked like Niva, until he reached a stack of more recent ones. At the top was a photo of a girl standing in a field, her back to the camera, wearing a yellow raincoat. Her posture, the size of her frame, it was her. At the center of the room was something worse. A wooden chair bolted to the floor, straps on the arms and legs. Around it, candles long since melted. Behind it, carved into the concrete wall, were names. Dozens of them. All scratched out, except one. Niva Tarris. Kael turned to leave, every cell in his body screaming to run. But before he reached the stairs, he heard something above. A scraping sound. Footsteps. He killed the flashlight and crouched in the dark, holding his breath. The door above creaked open, but no one came down. The footsteps stopped, then silence. Minutes passed before Kael found the courage to move. He climbed the stairs quietly, heart pounding. The shed door was open, and no one was in sight. He ran, all the way home, locking the door behind him. He gave the footage to his father, who called the police again. This time, they had something real. A warrant was issued, but when the authorities arrived at the Claymore house the next morning, they found it empty. Merrik Dane was gone. The underground room was sealed shut, the hatch replaced by fresh wooden flooring. No tapes, no photos, no chair. The only thing left was a VHS tape sitting on the front porch, wrapped in yellow string. It was labeled in shaky handwriting, "She's happy now." The police took the VHS tape into evidence, but they allowed the Tarris family to view a copy under supervision. Illyra, Joran, and Kael sat in a small, sterile room at the station as the tape began to play. The screen crackled with static, then slowly cleared to reveal a scene lit by flickering candlelight. A small room, made of stone and soil, like the one Kael had described beneath Merrik's shed. In the center sat a child in a chair, unbound but still, facing away from the camera. The bee. Yellow raincoat confirmed it. It was Niva. She didn't move for a long time. The silence was absolute. Then, as if hearing something only she could hear, she turned slowly toward the camera. Her expression was calm. Too calm for a 10-year-old child who had been missing for days. Her skin looked paler than before, almost translucent, and her eyes were wrong. Large, deep, empty. She raised one hand and pointed to something off camera. The camera jerked slightly, as if the person holding it turned to look. The screen blurred, then faded to black. For a full 30 seconds, there was only darkness. Then a new image appeared. The woods. Dense trees under a moonless sky. The camera panned slowly, as if searching for something. There were distant whispers, barely audible, muffled like voices underwater. Shapes shifted in the shadows. Then, for a brief moment, the figure appeared again. It stepped out from behind a tree, pale skin, long limbs, hollow black eyes, and it smiled. The screen erupted into static. That was the end of the footage. The station remained quiet. One officer coughed awkwardly and left the room. No one spoke. No one moved. Joran asked to take the tape, or even a copy of it. But the request was denied. It was labeled as part of an open investigation, though no one truly believed it would lead to anything. A week passed. Then 2. No sign of Merrik Dane. No further leads on Niva. The woods were searched again. Nothing. The town returned to its nervous silence, as if collectively deciding to forget what had happened. But the Tarrises couldn't forget. Kael stopped filming his skateboard videos. His drone gathered dust on a shelf. He spent most nights staring at the bird feeder footage, hoping something would reappear. Alira closed the bakery. She barely spoke anymore, her energy drained, her movements robotic. Joran, however, became obsessed. He started researching local legends, old newspaper clippings, stories of children vanishing from Ashburn Ridge and nearby towns over the last 50 years. He found patterns, names, faces, all uncannily similar to what Kael had seen on those old Polaroids in the bunker. Then he discovered a journal tucked inside the town archives. Misfiled among property records was an old leather-bound book belonging to a man named Ivor Claymore, the original owner of the house Merrik had moved into. The entries were erratic, paranoid, filled with drawings of tall, eyeless figures and warnings about the forest. One passage stood out. "The Hollow One comes when called. It feeds on memory. It leaves no scars, only silence. The chosen must go willingly. It cannot take what is not offered." Joran reread that line 100 times. It cannot take what is not offered. But Niva hadn't gone willingly. Had she? Then Kael remembered something. 3 weeks before she disappeared, Niva had come home from the woods with a handmade necklace, a charm. She said a friend had given it to her. They thought it was just one of her bug-collecting games. She wore it every day until the day she vanished. The memory felt like a punch to the gut. They never saw Niva again. But sometimes on foggy mornings, Kael wakes up to find the front gate open and a small charm hanging from the mailbox. Not the same one as before, always different, always carved with care. And on the quietest nights, when the wind dies and the trees stop swaying, Alira says she hears her daughter laughing in the distance, from the woods.